Thank you very much, and good morning, David. Hi. Just a quick scene set then. You've led the company since 2007, since when you have achieved many, many things, not least taking the company to become a Fortune 500. Now the second largest TV company in the States in terms of reach, the first for women, which I know is a fact of which you're very proud. We'll get into the sharp end, the business end shortly, but I wanted to get straight into content. First of all, you've got a hard-hitting series that's coming out to be broadcast globally across 200 countries. It's a collaboration with Steven Spielberg. Before I let you get a word in edgeways, I think we'll start by having a look at it.
Great.
Tell me about the concept and why this is so important to you personally, because obviously in the current political climate, and I've seen it, it's a fascinating series. Why was it important for you?
Well, thank you, Kate, and thanks, Carolyn, for having me. I was here once before. I had a wonderful time, so thank you so much. This started 5 years ago, really out of a conversation that I had with Steven. And I think it goes to a little bit of who we all are, because we have this opportunity to tell stories. And when you tell stories that mean something to you, it's always more powerful. And at Discovery, we get to tell true stories. That's really what we're about. We're not a scripted company. We're telling real stories. And so I said to Steven, and I'm involved with him in the Shoah Foundation, which is really about this to some extent. It's about understanding and fighting hate. It's about going anywhere where people are discriminated against because of their religion, their ethnicity, their skin color. And a lot of terrible things have happened. But it was really Steven's idea. I said to him, what is the story that you want to tell? What's the story that when you and I are gone and they come back and they look and they say, who was Steven and what did he care about? What is that story? And that's the story we should do together. And we can take it with Discovery uniquely everywhere in the world, reach 1 billion people. And he thought about it for really about 2 or 3 seconds, and he said, why we hate. That it's been a fascination of his to understand what is that about us as human beings. And I think it's an extraordinary piece of work because it has Steven's hands on it. Alex Gibney is a great storyteller. But little did we know, 5 years ago, where we would be, as not just here in the UK or in the US, but everywhere in the world. At least for me, I felt like for most of my life, things were getting better. And we were working toward more respect for other people and everybody having a chance to have their best life. And we just find in the last 5 years that things are much more of a challenge. And hate is significantly on the rise. Hate of immigrants, hate on skin color, hate of different people for their religious beliefs. So I think that this is really a great moment, and we hope that it begins a dialogue. That's what we try and do, begins a dialogue and maybe has an impact.
I wanted to pick up on that because I know you've been acknowledged for your philanthropic work, and I know you're very proud of the conservation work that you do at Discovery too. I was involved in a documentary, Racing Extinction, with you a number of years ago. How much of your personal passion and your values shaped the company and what you've done since you've been at the helm?
Well, it's why I came to Discovery. I was at NBC, which is a great company, running their cable group, and this opportunity to come to Discovery. It's a bit of a different company because we have a voice. We tell true stories. We have 10 to 12 channels in every country, and we have a chance to really have an impact. And John Malone and the Newhouse family talked to me at the time about really being able to, that their value of Discovery was that we could do well, but we could also do good. And it is a different company. We launch science channels in every country. A lot of you produce great content for us in the science genre. We lose money on most of those channels, but we're doing it because we think having great science content everywhere in the world makes a difference. And there's a lot that we do to create economic value, but we have platforms and we get to work with you and tell stories that really have an impact. Tim Davey is here, and we've collaborated over many, many years, but I was extraordinarily impressed with or blown away really by the idea that Blue Planet, the final episode of Blue Planet, talked about plastics in the ocean. And the reaction to that here in the UK gave rise to Theresa May changing the laws on plastics, and then the EU changed it. And that was the moment when I said, we have to go all in. And we went and structured a very broad collaboration now with the BBC, where we will own, outside of the UK, all of the natural history and science content for over the top. And the real reason that we're doing that is we have all of our content from Discovery, Animal Planet, and Science. We have all of Tim's content. We're creating more content, original content, together over the next 10 plus years. But our ambition is that we're going to document the planet together, and that maybe we could have a meaningful impact. It is probably the most important issue that we're facing. And if we can tell stories like Tim was able to do with his team in Attenborough, and we could tell more of those stories, that we could have an impact.
So how do you protect that when there's so much consolidation, when you've got the big media visionaries, Rupert Murdoch selling, when you've got Scripps selling to you? There are people asking, so when is Discovery up for sale? How do you protect what you've built up and that 10-year vision? And are you going to be up for sale in the next 10 years?
I hope not, because I love Discovery. But we're at a very interesting time. And we've chosen a path that's quite differentiated, and we feel good about it. We need all of your help, because it's really going to be about creating great content. But we're a very different company than everybody else. And I do think there'll be more consolidation. And I understand why Rupert raised his hand and said that we're not big enough, so we want to be part of Disney. And I understand why Jeff Bewkes said, I'm worried about the future. I'm not sure we're big enough, so I'm going to sell to AT&T. And I think it really relates to the idea of, if you're going to be in the general entertainment, scripted and movie business, then you have to have a massive amount of content. And if you're going to put that together and ask somebody to pay $5, $6, $15, and you want to get 100 million people, 150 million people, you need an awful lot of stuff, because you're trying to appeal to everyone. 750 million people here in Europe, hey, look what I got. I have scripted series and I have scripted movies. But there's 8 people doing that. And 8 great companies, maybe in the end there'll only be 4 of them, because they're going to have to buy each other, because it's going to get so confusing. But ultimately, people love scripted series and scripted movies, and there will be a few of those that are successful. That's not who we are. And I think that gives us a unique advantage. We're out of that business. The business that we're in is, we want to be in niches that people are passionate about. And the filter for us was, when we started in this business, all of us, is how do we create content that we could put on at 8 or 9 o'clock on a cable channel and just allocate it out. Then all of a sudden people could watch anything. So then people are asking, we ask the question, JB and I all the time, do we have content, what content do we have that people will watch before they'll watch anything else? Because they can choose from anything else. That was 3 or 4 years ago. And how do we create content with you that's more important, so they'll choose it? But now it's an even higher bar, we think, a much higher bar, which is, what will people pay for? What content or stories will people pay for before they pay for dinner? And that's the filter. That's why we bought all the golf in the world outside of the US. That's why we own most of the cycling in the world, and our ambition is to own all the cycling. That's why we now have the majority of the science, natural history, environmental content, along with all the great brands that Tim and Discovery have created. Because yes, I may want to see my scripted series. I want to see Miss Maisel. I want to see Chernobyl. I want to see Game of Thrones. But I still love golf. And I still love cycling. I still love science and natural history. I still love food. I'm in the kitchen. I want to figure out what are the right recipes. I love home. And so for us, we think that they have to continue to fight because they're splitting it 8 ways. But we own almost all the food content in the world, almost all the home content in the world. We own all the golf content in the world. And that is going to create, massive value over time to go into a country like China and say, if you want to see golf, we have it all. That's how we want to create value, and we're just going to lean aside and let the rest of those guys have their way with each other. And you saw it, this week, Big Bang and Seinfeld. Massive, old series, massive checks. You know what that says? Holy shit, we're in trouble. We don't have enough. What do the other 7 guys have? We go get it. I don't care what you need to pay for. It's going to take us 2 to 3 years to develop something else. That exists. Go get it. Maybe they'll like it. We better have it. That's not the business we're in, and that's why I think we're going to be successful.
So I want to come back to that, not least on the sporting front, but actually maybe we'll pick up on that, because talking about direct to consumer, which is obviously what everybody is keen to do, you were early into that with the Eurosport Player.
Given you were running both that traditional business model, the wholesale model, while moving towards that direct-to-consumer model, what were the lessons and particularly the toughest challenge that you faced? Because I'm sure that's what people are going to be quite keen to hear in the room, the lessons that you learned.
We're still learning lessons because we haven't figured it out yet, but we have been at it for 5 years, and we know one thing. We know that it's much, much harder to get somebody to pay for something every month. That we were in a business that was just terrific. We were in a B2B business. Somebody pays you, you put it on a channel, and you're good. It doesn't matter how good you are, whether they love you every day. But the 2 big things that we learned was, one, we took brilliant, hardworking, great people that were in the media business, and we put them we said, build Dplay for us, and schedule Dplay for us, or build the Eurosport Player for us. And that didn't work. A lot of those people are back in our company, but they're doing what they know how to do. It's a very different business. It's a direct marketing business. It's a technology business. It's a SAC business, subscriber acquisition. I'm on the board of Sirius. They have 1,000 people on the phone, because when you want to downgrade or detach your service, they want to resell it to you. That's a very different business than what we're in, all of us, which is creating great content and building characters that people love. So one is, we went and hired the person that built Marketplace, 20,000 employees for Amazon, and we hired 150 people in Seattle that are product development people, technology people, and that are very different than who we are. So I don't know if we're going to be successful, but we have people that do this for a living now.
When will you know? What will be your definition of success?
Definition of success is always the same for us in this business. It's scale. If you put a show on, how many people watch it? If we build a direct-to-consumer product, how many people come to it? The second thing that we learned that's very important, I think, for all of us, is the definition of content. What's content that people love? For instance, on the Player, if you were watching the US Open on the Player, we thought 2 years ago content was 21 courts, great angles, and you can watch any match that you want, and being able to promote it that way. So we said US Open starts at 11 o'clock in the morning, and people got up at 5 o'clock, they hit the Eurosport Player, they hit the button, and it said, tennis is on at 11 o'clock, here are all the matches, and people said, I hate this thing. And the reason they hated it is they're paying for this, and when they went there, they expected to see something. So we went to McEnroe, Chrissy, Becker, Wielander, Serena's coach. We trained them with an iPhone, and we said, go out and get us some content. So Patrick took some video of Serena having dinner, and McEnroe walked past court 13 and said, let me tell you about the match that I won on court 13. And Chrissy talked about who she thinks is the up-and-coming new player. Each of them with 2 or 3 minutes. We put you get up at 5 in the morning, we had 40 of them. We put on 5 of them. And people said, I love this. They loved it as much as they loved the tennis. But we then had to put another 5 on an hour later, 2 hours later. Same way you read a newspaper, we had to learn how to multi-publish, and we had to learn how to broaden our view, which we all are doing to get, what's storytelling? That's storytelling when McEnroe tells a story of what happened on court 13.
And are you thinking about demographic then, in that sense? Because so many of us are worried about, well, actually, I'm not so much, but Generation Z, because I think they kind of come through when they're ready. What's your perspective on who you're targeting in that sense with sport? I mean, you know, what's the average age of a golf
You know, the good news about a subscription business is, unlike our business, where when you get to be my age, you're of zero value when you're over 54 in most markets. You get paid for everything, for everybody when you don't have this 25 to 54 on the advertising side in most digital marketplaces. But once you have somebody paying, if the people that love golf are paying for us, that's a paying customer. The other big differentiator for us is that group of 8, not only do they have a competitive issue, but all you do once you buy that service is watch it. All you do is view it. So when you're done with Chernobyl, you watched it. You're done. When you're done with Miss Maisel, you watched it. You're finished. If we get you as a subscriber for us for cycling or for food or for golf, you watch the golf. But then when you say, hey, I like what Rory's wearing, you hit a button and you buy it. The reason we bought Golf Digest as the global authority on golf is that while you're watching, if you say, and you know you're coming to the UK, you say top 10 places to play golf in the UK, we give you the top 10, you hit a button, and you book a golf vacation, you book a tee time. So when Malone built cable channels, and then he built QVC and HSN, it was clumsy. But QVC and HSN were still massive multi-billion-dollar businesses. So Netflix has 150 million people that pay and do nothing else. If we can aggregate millions of people that are watching, but they're also buying a bicycle, buying cycling equipment, buying a vacation, buying food in the kitchen, we have a view and do concept that ultimately, from a multiple perspective, in terms of creating value, could be enormous.
Tell me about Skins.
So Skins that we announced this morning, this idea of being able to create content, we went and did a deal with Tiger Woods exclusively. But in the old days, we would have just done an instructional video with him. We hired Henny, who was one of the big golf commentators on Sky, and she's with Tiger all the time, creating content. And then we edit a lot of that content. And then we hired his caddy and his best friend, and they take content on Tiger, and they send it all to us. But we felt like we needed to do more. And if you remember, Phil and Tiger created a challenge match that got over 1 million people in the US to pay $20 to watch. So we said, you know what, that looks like it's pretty smart. So we sat down with Tiger and we said, you know, what else could we do? And we wanted to do something more international. So we created this big event that we announced this morning that'll be in Japan in October. Take a look.
Fast. Sorry. Okay, hold on.
So what that says for us and for you is the reason we bought all the golf in the world is really two big tentpoles. One, characters. That's what we do. We tell stories, but if we don't tell stories with great characters that people love, they don't engage. We're still, as human beings, we're all about people and hearing their stories or people telling stories. That's just four of those characters. There's 50% of the PGA Tour is local. It's international. It's people from all over the world. And so that was the main reason, because almost all content is local. We're here in the UK. We're most successful when we're creating content with you that's local, that's true to this culture, to this sensibility, to what people love here, that feels close to them. That's what we do. We're at our best when we're creating local content in all of our 200 countries. That's what we all strive to do. It means more work, it means more stories, but golf hits on both of those. And so we can go to Japan and we could say, okay, who should we get? What characters do we get? Imagine, outside of sport, if you had a great idea and you had all these characters that people know about that you can pull from. But I think the idea of local content and storytelling is really at the heart of Discovery, and it's the heart of what all of you guys do with us for a living.
And how important is the UK to your business?
It's hugely important. It gave us the confidence to become an international media company. We're the largest international media company now, and we started here 30 years ago. And it's a great market. I don't need to tell you. One of the great things about the market for us is we did get a false positive, because when it comes to factual content and thoughtful content and great documentary, the UK is a fantastic market. And there's something about the culture here that has great curiosity and great interest. And that's not true everywhere else. Factual content works quite well everywhere, but it works a little bit better, or maybe much better, here in the UK. And so when we started here with Discovery, and we started here with Science and Animal Planet many years ago, and we invested, it also has the richest creative community. It's probably, you would say, the US and the UK. And on the factual side, maybe it's kind of even now, but some of the, Jane Turton is here, who runs all three. She's quite brilliant and has done an amazing job, which we own 50% of that, which I'm very proud of. And the great producers, many of you work with Jane. Don't take it for granted. We're in many markets, we're really trying to create a good creative community, and it exists here in a way that we don't see almost anywhere else in the world.
Good stuff. We've got a few minutes left. I've got some quick fire questions for you. Golf, cycling, or motorsport?
We're hedging.
No, you.
So, me.
You. What would be your thing to pick? What's your thing?
My thing is golf, even though I'm terrible at it, but I enjoy it. I love the walk, and I love the journey.
If you weren't running Discovery, what would you be doing?
We have this charitable foundation where we pick tigers, because there's 3,400 tigers, wild tigers left on Earth. And we've really leaned into it because we felt that just telling stories with you wasn't enough. And we now have 6 million acres in India and in Russia, and we're doing a very good job of actually, because gestation is 3 months and 3 days, if they could be left alone. And I think I'd probably be working much harder in that area to make a difference. I think the issue of 20% of the animals that were on Earth when I was born are gone. And if we don't do something, this was part of what you and I talked about at one point with the sixth extinction. We love this sixth extinction, but one of the reasons that we got involved directly with our own hands is people saw it, there was some activation, but in the end, we have a generation, our generation is really, let me get back to myself. And we have to do something, or our grandchildren, my grandchildren, 50% of the animals that are on Earth will be gone. And we get to play in that space a little bit, but every one of us should be in that space.
Is that what you'd like your legacy to be, in large part? I'm not writing you off yet,
yeah.
David, but you know.
I think the coming to Discovery was, for me, a beginning of a journey to try and establish a legacy. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I hope it's going to be telling stories that have an impact on people. And the most important story is right now the environment and all of us that share the planet. There's no question about that.
Well, picking up on that, Levison Wood, one of your key talents, was talking last night. He's a great walker, of course, as I know are you. He was saying that television has to remain curious.
He walks across the Amazon.
Yeah.
I walk across Central Park.
He said we have to remain curious, authentic, and with a sense of wonder. So when you look across the competitive landscape, and as we go into the last sort of minute now, just a message for everybody in terms of what you think we should all be curious about, what's coming up on the horizon that we need to be paying attention to.
Well, I think we need, Discovery really at its heart is about satisfying curiosity. And, those other guys get to tell made-up stories. We get to tell real stories, which is always driven by what are we curious about? Stephen and I were curious about where does hate come from? I think the best stories come from the heart. We were spending, when I got to Discovery, $400 million on content. We're spending $4.5 billion now. Our whole legacy of JB, who runs our international business, was all along we've said we got to spend more on content, we got to tell more stories. Now we have to tell them on more platforms, and we need to figure out how to get you to think about what stories you want to tell that are true to your heart and get them on our air and take them around the world.
David, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks very much. Really good to see you.